Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So today our second lecture and we are going to conduct it on the topic of orbit. We'll be going through the normal anatomy of the orbit and a little bit about the proptosis because the other disorders of the orbit are not included in your semester. Can you hear me clearly? जी आपको मेरी आवाज आ रही है क्लियर?
हर वक्त मशीन गोली बैठी है।
Okay, now first of all we will be going through the normal anatomy of the orbit, which is basically a pear-shaped cavity. This is a bony cavity which supports the eyeball. You all know that eyeball is a soft structure and it needs some support from outside. Wherever there is a hollow structure, it needs a support from outside. Hollow and the soft structure. I can give you an example that we have lungs and heart, which are very soft tissues, and they are being supported by the rib cage, which covers it from outside, so that they are prevented from being damaged by the hazards that are present in the external environment. Similarly, eyeball is a soft structure, and it has to be prevented from the external hazards, and the cavity which helps it in preventing it from the damage from the hazards is the orbital cavity. Now, orbit is a pear-shaped cavity. It consists of a roof, it consists of floor, medial wall, and lateral wall. Now, what is the roof made up of? The roof of the orbital cavity is made up of lesser wing of sphenoid, orbital plate of frontal bone. These are the two bones that combinedly make up the roof of the orbit. Okay. Whenever there is a damage to the roof of the orbit, there might be pulsatile proptosis. Pulsatile proptosis. It means that proptosis which is uh, pulsating. Okay. So the eyeball will look like pulsating. It will be burst and it will be pulsating when you. And how will you find the pulsation? You have to palpate the eyeball. It will be felt like pulsating. Okay, so the pulsating proptosis is found whenever there is damage to the roof of the orbit. And why does this pulsation occurs? Because it is basically the uh, pulsation comes from the big vessels that are present at the base of the brain. Okay. Then is the lateral wall. It is the strongest wall of the orbital cavity. It is made up of greater wing of sphenoid. It is made up of zygomatic bone, and these two bones are very thick, and therefore they support the eyeball laterally. Whenever there is any hit from outside toward the lateral orbital wall, it is protected by this strong bony cavity, strong bony wall. The floor is made up of the zygomatic bone, maxillary bone, and the palatine bone. Now, this floor of the orbit separates the eyeball or the orbital cavity from the maxillary sinus. Similarly, the roof of the orbit separates the orbital cavity from the frontal sinus. So there is a sinus just above the orbit, there is a sinus just below the orbit. There is another sinus on the medial side of the orbit, and that is the ethmoid sinus. Now, the medial wall of the orbit is the thinnest among all the bony walls, and it is made up of very small thin bones like maxillary, lacrimal, ethmoid bone, sphenoid bone. These are the four bones that make up the medial wall of the orbit. So all these walls have some clinical implications. Whenever I already told you there is damage to the roof of the orbit, it will produce pulsatile proptosis and there will be herniation of brain downward into the orbit. So the brain can come down whenever the orbital roof is damaged. Similarly, the lateral wall, when the lateral wall is damaged, there is nothing to herniate into the orbit. While inferiorly, whenever the floor of the orbit is damaged, what will happen? Whenever the floor of the orbit is damaged, it will produce herniation of the orbital contents into the maxillary sinus. So that is why whenever there is damage to the floor of the orbital wall, the eyeball might herniate downward into the maxillary sinus. Similarly, the medial wall, the thinnest one, whenever there is damage to the medial wall of the orbit, what will happen that whenever we will blow air, the air will directly enter into the from the nose into the orbit, and therefore the eyeball will proptose out. So whenever there is damage to the medial wall, we ask the patient not to blow with high power because that air will actually push the eyeball forward. So this is these are some of the clinical implications of the damage to the orbital walls, and they can be understood only and only if you know the basic anatomy of the orbit. Now, what is the superior orbital fissure? The superior orbital fissure is nothing but it is an entrance of the brain contents or the structures into the orbital cavity. So it is made by a slit in between the greater and lesser wing of the sphenoid bone in the orbit. The superior part of the superior orbital fissure consists of the lacrimal, frontal, and the trochlear nerve. The other structure is the superior ophthalmic vein. These both structure, the vein and the nerve, enter the orbit through the superior orbital fissure from its upper part. From the lower part, there is superior and inferior division of oculomotor nerve, abducens nerve, nasociliary nerve, and the sympathetic nerve fibers. These enter the orbit through the inferior part of the superior orbital fissure. So you have to remember the contents, the entry, mode of entry of the orbital contents. Okay, now here is a picture. This is a schematic picture. Okay, this is showing you that these are some of the bones around the orbit. You can see that in the floor there is a maxillary bone. Medially, you can see lacrimal bone. You can see ethmoid bone, a part of the frontal bone. In the floor, the major most part is made by the frontal bone. Temporally, the most part is made by the zygomatic and the greater wing of the sphenoid. The floor is formed by the zygomatic and the maxillary bone and a part of the lesser wing of the sphenoid. So these are all different parts of the. Now this is this is not the schematic picture, this is an actual picture of the orbit that has been taken, and this is showing you that behind the orbit there is a superior orbital fissure and then there is an inferior orbital fissure.
सर आवाज नहीं आ रही है पीछे से
Inferior
बैकग्राउंड में
orbital
बहुत
fissure
वॉइसेस आ रही है लड़कियों की
and the inferior orbital fissure. There is a superior orbital fissure and then there is an inferior orbital fissure. So then there is a optic foramen. Over here you can see an optic canal from where the optic nerve enters the orbit. This is a bony canal, and this is again made up of very thin thin plate of the bone, which can get easily fractured whenever there is damage to the eyeball. Okay, whenever there is blow to the eye, any blunt injury, this optic canal can get fractured, and it will lead to damage to the optic nerve, which is passing through it. Okay. Now, superior orbital fissure, as I already told you, that it consists of the third, fourth, sixth nerves, cranial nerves, the ophthalmic vein, and the sympathetic fibers. Then there is an inferior orbital fissure. This is the inferior orbital fissure, and it consists of the maxillary nerve, infraorbital blood vessels, and ascending branches from sphenopalatine ganglion. These are going through the inferior orbital fissure. Then there is a supraorbital foramen. Here is the supraorbital foramen, which is present near the supraorbital margin. This is the supraorbital margin. Here you will find a supraorbital foramen, and it will allow supraorbital nerve and the blood vessels which will pass through it. The supraorbital nerve and the supraorbital blood vessels. Okay. Then there is a William tubercle in the orbit, which is just an anatomical landmark. Okay. Then we have lacrimal fossa, which is present superotemporally. Here, there is a lacrimal fossa. You can see that there is some hollow space over here. This is just for lacrimal gland. The lacrimal gland is situated in this lacrimal fossa. So the lacrimal fossa is a site for lacrimal gland. Okay. Now again, uh, these are some of the contents of the orbit. We all know that eyeball is the largest content of the orbit. There are extraocular muscles. There are cranial nerves which supplies the eyeball, and this is, I think, typing mistake. This is first cranial nerve, the optic nerve. Sorry, optic nerve. It's not the olfactory nerve. It's the optic nerve. Then there is the oculomotor nerve. Then there is trochlear nerve, trigeminal nerve, abducens nerve. All these are passing. The optic nerve is the first one, the largest one. Okay. Blood vessels, extraocular fat is present in the orbit. Fat is actually a cushion. Okay. Fat is actually a cushion that will help the eyeball to move easily in the orbit, in the bony orbit. This fat is actually a cushion. Yes, I think you are raising hands, but you have to wait because I will give you time for questions. Okay. Then there are eyelids, lacrimal gland, lacrimal sac, lacrimal duct, eyelids, ligaments, conjunctiva, trochlea. Trochlea is basically a structure which hangs uh, the inferior oblique with the superior oblique with the orbit. Over here, you can see this is the trochlea, and this is the superior oblique, which is hanged over here with the orbital bone. Then we have a ciliary ganglion in the orbit. These are the muscles that are present in the orbit: the superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, lateral rectus, superior oblique, inferior oblique, superior levator palpebris, superior oris. Okay, all these are the muscles that are present in the orbit. Okay, conjunctiva, and then is basically a membranous sheet. You can say it's a mucous membrane that covers the orbit, that covers the eyeball. Okay. Then what is orbital septum? Orbital septum is a membranous sheet. You should differentiate the conjunctiva from orbital septum. Conjunctiva is the one which covers the eyeball, while orbital septum is a sheet that covers the anterior wall of the or the boundary of the orbit. Okay, this is a septum. Okay, it is basically continuous with the bone, the periosteum of the bone. Okay, why orbital septum is very important landmark? Because if there is infection in front of the orbital septum, we will call it as preseptal cellulitis. And then if there is infection behind the orbital septum, we will call it as orbital cellulitis. That's why it is a very important landmark which differentiates the orbital preseptal cellulitis from the orbital cellulitis. Okay. Now these bones, we have already discussed them. Now what is the function of the orbit? It holds the eyeball. Okay. And then it contains the muscles which move the eyeball. It contains the fat cushion. Okay. And then it protects the eyeball because of the bony structure. And then it's also a route of entry for the nerves and blood vessels. The nerves and blood vessels which enter the orbit or exit the orbit, they have to pass through the orbit. Okay, so that is also one of the function. What are the diseases of the orbits? There is protrusion of the eyeball, which is called proptosis. If this proptosis is due to thyroid eye disease, then we will term it as exophthalmos. Exophthalmos is always bilateral. Proptosis can be unilateral, but exophthalmos is always bilateral. Then we have anophthalmos, in which the eyeball is, instead of bulging out, it is penetrated deep, so that it looks like that the eyeball has got smaller in size. It looks like, but it's basically anophthalmos. Then there might be uh, uh, pain in the eye, there might be eyelid and conjunctival changes, there might be diplopia, and then there might be visual acuity changes. Now in these pictures, you can see that this patient have protruded eyeballs, but it is bilateral. If it is due to thyroid eye disease, we will call it exophthalmos. If it is not due to thyroid eye disease, we will call it as bilateral proptosis. Okay. Over here, you can see there is unilateral proptosis. Unilateral proptosis, the other eye is normal, but on the right side, the right eye has bulged out. So we will not say in any mean it as exophthalmos. We will say proptosis. This is proptosis. Then there are two types of proptosis. One is the axial proptosis and the other is non-axial proptosis. In axial proptosis, the eyeball bulges out symmetrically from all directions, while in non-axial proptosis, the eyeball bulges unequally outside from any specific direction. For example, if the eyeball bulges out superiorly, that is any mass in the orbit like lacrimal gland tumor, if it is pushing the eyeball forward, it will be protruded eccentrically, and then we will term it as non-axial proptosis. So it is a type of proptosis which is non-axial. Similarly, eyeball might protrude superiorly from any mass below. It might bulge or protrude medially from any mass from the opposite side, that is laterally, or it might bulge from medial side from any mass. So these were the different types of axial or non-axial proptosis. Okay. Whenever there is intraconal lesion, it will cause axial proptosis. Whenever there is extraconal lesion, it will cause non-axial proptosis. In this picture, you can see that the eyeball has bulged out and it is axial proptosis. It's not a non-axial, it's an axial proptosis. Axial proptosis, that is bulging out symmetrically from all directions, occurs due to intraconal lesion. What is this cone? Yes, this is the picture which will show you and make the concept clear that what is conal or extraconal. This superior rectus muscle and the inferior rectus muscle, you can recognize both of these. Superior rectus, inferior rectus. The space and the contents in between these two muscles which are surrounding the eyeball and going backward, this space is called the cone because it's a cone shape. You can see there's a base, there's an apex. This is a cone. Whenever there is a lesion inside the cone, it will produce axial proptosis. Whenever there is any lesion outside this cone, it will produce non-axial proptosis. I think this concept of axial and non-axial proptosis should have been clear in your mind. Okay. Now, what are the causes of intraconal proptosis? Like thyroid eye disease, like optic nerve diseases, tumors, meningiomas, gliomas. Extraconal diseases like lacrimal gland disease, okay, which pushes the eyeball nasally. So these are the extracorneal lesion which produces non-axial proptosis. Okay. Now, what are the causes of the different causes of the proptosis? The examples. One is the thyroid eye disease, which produce exophthalmos. Then there are infections like orbital cellulitis. It also causes proptosis. There are diseases like orbital inflammatory disease. There are diseases like vasculitis, which causes proptosis. There are neoplastic diseases like lacrimal gland tumors, metastatic tumors from other body parts like lungs. They might spread into the eye in the orbit. The lymphomas, they might also spread into the orbit. Then there are vascular diseases like orbital varices. This is swelling of the veins inside the orbit. The blood vessels, they get dilated and then they push the eyeball forward. So how do we differentiate these varices? We ask the patient to do the Valsalva maneuver or ask the patient to cry. When they will do so, the eyeball will bulge out because of the pressure, and that will give you a clue to the diagnosis of orbital varices. Okay, trauma might also cause proptosis. Trauma, this is because it might cause retrobulbar hemorrhage, bleeding, which will push the eyeball forward. Then there is pseudoproptosis. Means this is not the actual proptosis, but the condition looks like proptosis. Ophthalmos, congenital glaucoma. The eyeball is enlarged. It's not proptosed, but it looks like that it is proptosed. So it's the pseudoproptosis. Contralateral enophthalmos means there is the eyeball has sunken in and it has caused enophthalmos. So inside, in spite of the fact that the eyeball has gone or sunken inside, we will overlook it and we will say that the other eyeball has bulged out. This is also wrong, then this will produce a condition called pseudoproptosis. Ipsilateral lid retraction. Sometimes lid retraction might give a picture which simulates the proptosis. So that will also give you a diagnosis of pseudoproptosis. Whenever a patient comes to you with proptosis, you have to ask the duration, the rate of onset, and then you have to ask about the ocular symptoms like diplopia, visual acuity, visual field. Okay, you have to ask about the foreign body sensations, the history of trauma. You have to ask about the family history of proptosis. Okay. Uh, then on examination, the main tool to measure the protrusion of the eyeball is the exophthalmometer. Okay, this is a tool. This is like a scale. If you don't have exophthalmometer, you can very easily measure the protrusion of the eyeball with the help of a simple scale. Okay, you have to keep the, let me show you the picture for, yes, this is the exophthalmometer. Okay, over here there is scaling which will show you the protrusion of the eyeball. Okay, this same thing we can do with a simple scale, and we have to find out the distance in between the corneal apex and the lateral orbital rim. This is the lateral orbital rim. यहाँ पे होती है. This is over here. You have to palpate it. The lateral orbital rim. The distance from the lateral orbital rim and the apex of the cornea. Okay. This will give you. Normally it is 16 to 20 millimeter. If it is more than 21 millimeter, or there's a difference of more than 2 millimeter between the two eyes, you will say that there is protrusion of the eyeball. So you have to check the distance. It's 16 to 20 millimeter, and the distance is in between orbital, in between the corneal apex and the lateral orbital rim. What are the complications of proptosis? See, if the eyeball has protruded for a longer period of time, there will be exposure, which will lead to damage to the conjunctiva, congestion, damage to the cornea, and again, there will be, in the back side, there will be compression of the optic nerve, because optic nerve is a delicate structure. Due to the pressure, it might be compressed, and then there might be restriction of the eye movement due to the damage to the muscles, extraocular muscle. They might be restricted because of the chronic proptosis. Okay. Now, how will you diagnose that the patient is having exophthalmos? Clinically, you have done the examination. For the laboratory investigation, what you do, for the laboratory investigation, there is no blood report. There's no blood test other than the T3, T4, TSH, the thyroid levels you can do from the blood level. But the basic tool to diagnose the proptosis and the orbital diseases is CT scan and MRI. CT scan will give you the bony lesions and the bony details of the orbit, and you have to specifically take the coronal section and the axial section. Both sections are very important. Other is MRI. MRI is more diagnostic as compared to CT scan, because It will give you a detail about the soft tissues in the orbit. So it will give you a clue about any optic nerve tumor, any other lacrimal gland tumor, any soft tissue injury in the eyeball, in the orbit. All these are dependent upon the MRI picture. Okay. Only point which has been left in this presentation is treatment. Whenever you want to treat the proptosis, treat the underlying disease. Okay? If you have treated the underlying disease, but still the proptosis is there and it is causing complications, for example, it is causing exposure of the cornea and conjunctiva leading to ulceration and damage, the best way is to close the eyelids, suture the eyelids, suture the upper eyelid with the lower eyelid. This is called tarsorrhaphy. Okay, tarsorrhaphy. Suture the upper eyelid with the lower eyelid. The other and the last tool to treat the proptosis, when every measure fails, what you have to do, you have to compress the walls of the orbit. You have to decompress the walls of the orbit. If there is swelling, if there is some mass in the orbit which is leading to proptosis, and there is threat of optic nerve compression, the one of the way to treat is remove the lateral wall of the orbit. This is called decompression. If it doesn't cure, you can even remove the flow. These are the two walls of the orbit that can be removed safely. You can't remove the roof because on the other side there is brain. You can't remove the medial wall because on the other side there is nose, and then there is a very delicate ethmoid sinus which also leads to brain. So the only walls that can be removed are the floor and the lateral wall. You can remove them and cause decompression. This is called decompression. Okay. Now, okay, if you have any questions, any queries about the proptosis, you can now ask. Okay. Hello. Excuse me. ये आवाज नहीं आ रही.
स्टूडेंट्स के
लेक्चर खत्म हो गया, वो क्वेश्चन सेक्शन में कुछ भी नहीं, कोई आवाज नहीं है इसमें.
Hello? Hello?